Welcome back, everybody. So in thinking about what we heard earlier today, that journey that Stephanie's mom took wouldn't be possible without the innovations in the life sciences company. Those incredible discoveries that have dramatically changed the way that we can support patients and improve their lives. But there's so much work that goes into between that scientific discovery and bringing it to market, going through all the clinical trials, and then educating the prescribers about how and when to use that medication from a clinical perspective, managing the economics associated with that therapy, and getting that information to the prescriber, to the physician at the point of care when they need it the most, usually within their electronic health record. So today we're going to learn more about this perspective from life sciences. We're going to hear from Brian Bamberger, who's a practice lead for life sciences for point of care partners. He'll share his expertise and his insights as we learn more about those challenges and that perspective from life sciences. Brian?
Thanks, Andrew. I'm with Point of Care Partners, a consulting firm that works with all stakeholders in the specialty space. Our firm is a mix of leaders of technology firms and people who understand the different stakeholder perspectives across healthcare. I've been working in the pharmaceutical industry for 25 years and started the first formulary database for EHRs in 1998. And I've led the life sciences practice at POCP for the last 10 years. Our firm's been involved in standards committees and for both pharmacy and medical benefit for many years. And we've seen many, many advances. And I've been an active member in NCPDP for more than 25 years and seen many of these standards evolve over time. Happy to see that evolution, realize that there's more to be done. I'm here to address the life sciences perspective in this changing market, and I'm going to try and bring their viewpoint to this discussion. I've never been more excited at the prospect of health technology and new pharmaceutical treatments as I am right now. New treatments for small populations of diseases or subpopulations are coming to market faster and faster. From cancer to heart disease to a growing list of rare diseases that have never had treatments before, new treatments are coming to light. These exciting treatments bring new challenges. And many of those challenges revolve around communicating the best information to providers and patients when they need it. We can all sympathize with the plight of patients and their caregivers, like Stephanie Stern, who spoke before me about getting new medications for her mother. We all have stories about family members and friends who get bounced around the process, end up skipping treatments, or just give up on therapies that can improve their lives. We can certainly do better. And I think we can safely say that all stakeholders have the same goal. Let's get the right drug to the right patient at the right time. Technology has made major gains over the last decade, but there's still gaps. And we're going to review a few of those now. The first gap in today's process is where the product will be covered. And this depends on the product and the payer involved. And what I'm speaking about is that some brands are covered both under the medical benefit and the pharmacy benefit. And the coverage varies based upon sometimes the site of care and the method and the payer involved. So some of these drugs, for example, one we're working on, the first dose is an infusion and follow-up doses are self-injected. So the infusion is covered under the medical benefit, and the pharmacy benefit covers the self-injections that go along after the infusion. And, there's two separate processes today that just, it's just very confusing, especially when it varies from one patient to the next based upon their payer. And, this divide's got to be closed, right? And so where pharmacy benefits have moved forward, medical benefits haven't. Where medical benefits have moved forward with new services and capabilities, maybe pharmacy benefit hasn't. It's a glaring difference in the industry, and it needs to be addressed. If we add medical devices to this world, it gets even more complex. And technology can certainly play a role in resolving these divides, creating more similarities, and moving the process faster to expedite the necessary approvals and so forth. So we know of a few companies trying to automate this by using processes that integrate into the EHR, that extract information and try and send it along to the right locations. And they're having some mixed success, and further revisions are needed. Our second gap is specialty pharmacy and the distribution channel. I think there's a logical limit to the number of places that it makes sense to inventory an expensive specialty medication. Each payer has its own pharmacy and distribution organizations it favors, and manufacturers may have limited distribution as well because of the logistics involved and just the whole process that goes into moving the products around. This leaves provider organizations and patients trying to reconcile the differences with no real means to communicate any of this information into the EHR that guide the provider organization. We need to integrate information better into these systems to inform the process and take out some of the wrinkles for this. Add to this the growing desire of health systems and integrated delivery networks wanting to connect all of the care for their patients. These health systems, too, want to play a role in distribution because 43 days to get a patient started on therapy is 40 days too many. Organizations like Vanderbilt have their own delivery fleet of vehicles to speed products to patients, even taking a picture of the delivery on the patient's front doorstep as Amazon would. They're going to extreme lengths to integrate this into the entire process, and they provide a new and different way of interacting with patients because they want that whole process from the order all the way through delivery to carry it themselves. The technology to integrate the information on where drugs are available from the payer and life sciences companies' perspective is an issue that needs to be resolved, and more of that information needs to flow out both to patients and the providers. Along with the availability of products comes the locations for administration. If a patient isn't self-administering, either with a tablet or self-injecting, a physician and a provider organization needs to understand what the best site of care for administration is. And that gap needs to be closed by the payers, who need to be able to communicate that information effectively as part of the approval process and work that information into the EHR system. This is not a time for a fax machine to come into play and send information back and forth. While pharmaceutical companies and life sciences companies use telephone helplines and support organizations and field reimbursement specialists to assist, the real answer lies in making this information available at the fingertips of providers and patients. So our next challenge is keeping patients and providers informed, and technology can certainly play a role here. But as the industry has evolved, there's still some catching up to do with the rest of the marketplace and the way different information moves around. If I compare a specialty drug distribution to a meal delivery, healthcare is woefully inadequate. DoorDash keeps me posted throughout the process, and specialty pharmacies, payers, drug companies need to do the same. Continual updates on the process, what to expect, and the timing is important. Also, background information on treatments and what to expect is equally important. Life science companies have studied the patient groups, have tested how to best communicate with patients, and that information should be shared with other stakeholders to make the most of communication opportunities. Great patient education materials typically exist for most medications, but are underutilized. Incorporating these resources is important for patient satisfaction and adherence. There are life science companies today that are driving new technologies for on-demand publishing, integrating provider information into the education materials, driving to the common goal of more informed patients, and driving that communication both from the provider organization, their doctor, as well as the pharmaceutical company that may be behind the product. So the next issue to address is the process of diagnosing and selecting a medication and completing the appropriate approvals to get that medication into patients' hands. Research and data analysis is greatly expanding the evidence and guidelines that providers need to digest and put into practice. An entire area of study has opened called implementation science, which is taking evidence and putting it into practice. Adopting society guidelines needs to be in line with payer approvals and the documentation and the capability to get that into the workflows that physicians use every day to see their patients. And along the way, automating the PA process also needs an update. Payers are doing a better job through real-time benefit information of assessing the need for a PA and waiving off an unnecessary prior authorization if they know they're going to approve it. More standardizing of the questions and automating the exchange of information between the payer and the provider answering the questions to move through the approval process is needed. It can be done. It's going to take some work. And that process is started with a number of organizations and understanding how this process may move as it goes forward. And we've been working with several brands to understand the superset of questions across all the payers and how to use information that already exists in the EHR to extract that information. And let me tell you, from everything we've seen, the breadth of information required by payers is staggering when you move from one payer to another. For providers, answering 50% of the questions in an automated way is at best a mediocre start. As an industry, we need to be closer to 100% of the questions being answered and updated the information to allow the information to flow back and forth without taking up a lot of provider time. I know my dermatologist has 5 people dedicated to prior authorization. And in many cases, these are going to be distributed by specialty pharmacies, and the provider is just providing a service to me as the patient to get through that prior authorization process. It's mind-boggling how much resources get tied up. In future communications, payer guidelines need to go to providers to the extent possible, creating alignment on the transition to new guidelines when they're published as needed. How that needs to work needs more thought and collaboration. HL7, a standards organization, has a good start in Da Vinci Project, but the pace needs to quicken to address the needs of providers and patients today, because this is a real issue. Another issue is improving the process to identify patients who have rare diseases for which new treatments are coming to market. This involves expanding genetic testing, recording of genetic test results in a way that can be used to qualify patients, and automating the approval process between the provider's office, the physician, and the payer itself. And these rare diseases are getting more and more complex. We're working with an organization who is sponsoring the genetic testing for their rare disease area for free, because they know to get the subset of patients that are going to be for their particular treatment, they need to drive more and more testing in the marketplace. Patient support programs are also an area ripe for improvement. Different brands see varied use of the materials they create. Most brands have extensive market research that can help stakeholders learn about patient subgroups and the communications that may resonate and motivate patients to stay on therapy. Other support programs offered by manufacturers are also underused by patients, including financial support programs, nursing calls and hotlines for questions, extensive video education, and many more unique programs, too numerous to go into here. One area we've seen work well is text-based programs, creating a connection between the life sciences company and the patient to speed enrollment. Generally, these programs start with a text message from the provider to the patient, and then the patient follows up to engage with the life sciences company. This takes some of the burden off of the provider's office. As the industry prepares for value-based care models, all stakeholders will need to come together to build new capabilities that will, for example, identify the right subpopulation for current and future treatments, track dosing and outcomes in a secure way to know that the drug was administered and the results that the medication produced. And technology has a role here, as well as in communicating information that is complete and trusted and secure. Let's sum it up from a pharmaceutical or life sciences perspective. Stakeholders need to work together in integrating medical and pharmacy benefit investigations. That'll go a long way for products that can be covered in either setting and streamline the process for providers. Along with this, further automation of the prior auth process is needed for both benefit types. Facilitating the electronic prescribing of specialty medications, much of it done on paper today, does not suffice in moving to individual portals or one-off solutions. The workflow that providers need and are expecting is back in their EHR, and some kinds of one-off app solutions are just not going to work for them. Also, integrating information on limited distribution that payers and pharmaceutical companies or life sciences companies have is needed to be reconciled, cross-referenced, and then delivered into the EHR to improve that experience and get the prescriptions directed to the right locations and not passed off from one location to another. Improving patient communications throughout the process is vital. Using existing resources that can go a long way. Facilitating the electronic enrollment of patients into support programs, including the patient consent component, and connecting patients to patient assistance programs is vital in today's market. All of these challenges are complex and a difficult road, but we believe that these challenges can be overcome with the involvement of the entire healthcare community. And we see life sciences companies willing to do their part and have their resources put in place to help expand and improve the experience and help facilitate new solutions to help both the providers, physicians, and patients as they move along this continuum. Thanks for the opportunity to address you today. I'll turn it back to Andrew.
Thanks, Brian. As I mentioned, I've been in health information technology for over 20 years, and most of my time has been in electronic health records. And actually, it wasn't until I heard you speak that I realized I was probably one of your very first customers for that formulary product. And for electronic health records, for those of you that haven't been deeply involved in it, as I have, haven't been in those provider practices and studied and understand their workflow and helped to build those systems, we've seen a lot of progress. We started with formularies years ago. Now we have tools like real-time prescription benefits that can show the provider, the prescriber, that actual price of the medication that they're thinking about, as well as potentially less expensive alternatives. These are industry standards that have been widely adopted, and we're seeing here at Surescripts a lot of benefit from that from prescribers. We also see across the industry widespread adoption of electronic prior authorization that's integrated into the electronic health record, saving that time, helping practices not spend 5 FTEs, as Brian described for his dermatologist, to get those prior auths done. But we still have a big challenge, especially in specialty medications. In specialty medications, about half of them are covered under the pharmacy benefit, again, we have some really innovative tools now that are industry standards and being adopted across the country by practices. And on the medical benefit side, you still see phone calls, faxes, people, lots of processes that consume those precious personal resources, whether it's at the practice side, whether it's at the pharmacy, whether it's at a hub, or whether it's the patient trying to work through the process. We have a lot of work to do on the medical benefit side. And I've personally been spending a lot of time talking to organizations about this. And I'm excited to see how we collectively, people on this forum today, can help solve that problem. So I would like to hear from everyone again. We're going to bring up a quick poll. So let's look at that now. And here's a question. Which of the following solutions, so things you heard Brian talk about, will contribute the most to facilitating an increased electronic prescribing of specialty medications? So I'd love to hear your thoughts here. All right, let's give this a few more seconds. Okay. Well, I think not a surprise and consistent with our first poll question, it's around cost, it's around affordability. And again, on the pharmacy benefit side, we've seen great progress. There's an NCPDP standard that allows that communication of price and affordability information right at the point of care for medications covered under the pharmacy benefit, but there's really nothing like that yet on the medical benefit side. So a lot of work to be done still in the industry, and these are not life sciences problems. You know, Brian was representing the life sciences industries, but these are the challenges and the cost that go into all of the stakeholders in that process of starting the patient that we collectively can work on improving and eliminating. So we're going to take a brief break again. We are going to reconvene in about 10 minutes at 12:25 Eastern Time. And at that point, we'll hear about the perspective of the specialty pharmacy.